DawgNation, and welcome into DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation Insider Connor Riley. I've said it on the show before in the open that sometimes when we're coming up with this, there are moments when we really have to think about what we're doing, and there are other times when there's just like this spark and you kind of know. And Connor and I had that moment on Saturday during the Georgia game. Y'all might be tired of hearing us talk about Taylor Swift, but it has to be mentioned that I will give credit to Sanford Stadium for playing more music. And we heard a Taylor Swift song come on. We kind of looked at each other like, oh, that's cool. And then there was like another one and then another one. And we both had this moment where we looked at each other and we're like, oh, it's a mashup. And it was awesome. The game was great, but that was one of the highlights for me.
I don't know if the going from, what was it, Bad Blood into Blank Space back to back was necessarily the mashup I wanted to hear. But I think it's a good job by Sanford Stadium to at least cater a little bit to a more younger and excited audience to be there. And I think it certainly worked. And I look forward to seeing what they do against UMass this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that, like, beggars can't be choosers in this instance because we've been asking for more and begging for more. And I feel like we finally got what we were looking for.
Yeah, so it's exciting, and I look forward to seeing how Georgia tries to replicate what they did against Tennessee against UMass this weekend.
Yeah, so fan atmosphere is something that we'll talk about later on in the show. We'll do a whole thing about it, but why don't we go ahead and get to it? This is DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
All right, DawgNation, welcome in and happy Thursday to you all. Georgia has a cupcake game this weekend, which kind of comes at the perfect time. So we've got some fun stuff in store on the show today. Lots of room for creativity. UGA has been dealing with injuries all season long, especially in the game against Tennessee. But it's those UGA newcomers that have really stepped up in the face of adversity. We'll break it all down for you. Then we'll have our Dog Bite segment where we'll talk about all the Brett Thorson stuff, as well as how does Georgia get to the SEC championship and what would be our dream playoff scenario for the Dogs. We'll follow it up with the best college football tweets of the week. And then I told you guys we would talk about the stadium atmosphere. So that's going to come in an accountability check segment, not so much for us, but as Brandon Adams likes to call them, the stadium operations people, who, by the way, 10 out of 10 will give you your flowers. But let's go ahead and start with this. The newcomers for Georgia, and we're talking freshmen. We can also include transfers into this conversation. They've really impressed me as of late at a point in the season where they really shouldn't be doing the things that they've been doing, but UGA's faced so much injury, and I do feel like they're going to continue to get more meaningful reps against UMass and potentially even Georgia Tech while everyone else still gets healthy.
Yeah, I think you look at some of the guys that are looking to make that next step. You know, Kirby Smart often likes to say, at this time of year, they're not freshmen anymore. You know, KJ Bolton is a guy we've been talking about from the beginning of the year. But I think you have to start with coming out of that Tennessee game. Nitro Tuggle providing some juice to that wide receiver room. 2 catches for 25 yards, but I thought he had a pretty impactful play when he catches a second down pass and ends up getting a face mask penalty that controversial to some Tennessee fans. But it's guys like him that are making that leap and are able to go out there and not so much star like KJ Bolton has done for Georgia this year and play every snap in the secondary or wherever that might be. But for their ability to go out there and give Georgia something, provide them some extra depth, make a play or two, that's what they're really looking for from some of these young guys this time of year. You know, Nate Frazier is obviously Georgia's #1 running back now. I think that's more by circumstance than necessarily what he's shown he can do. But guys like Nitro Tuggle, Chris Cole are guys who have helped this first team even in bigger games than what we'll see against UMass this weekend.
Yeah, specifically when talking about Nitro, I think Kirby Smart said something this week along the lines of this was a really great game for Nitro to gain confidence against such a good defense. And even though he goes against a good defense every week, to do it in real time in a big game like that definitely gives you that confidence that you need to carry forward. We could call it a breakout game. You may look at the stats and not see that, but his presence was definitely felt. There was a lot of social media hype. And I do think the next 2 games we could still see him make that giant leap, because if I'm Kirby Smart and the Dogs, I don't want to risk Dylan Bell or Anthony Evans. So I do feel like the next 2 games could be astronomical for someone like Nitro.
It's not a breakout game for Nitro. It's a breakthrough moment for Nitro in showing that he can go out there and help contribute and play winning football for this Georgia team. Look, Georgia's very thin at wide receiver right now. I don't expect Dylan Bell to play this week. We'll see for his status against Georgia Tech. I think they're going to try and get Anthony Evans more involved this week as he continues to come back from his hamstring injury. But if you're able to get something out of Nitro, and I think if Georgia's able to get out to an early lead in this game and get up by a significant margin, it's going to allow him to get more reps. And not just him in particular. I was going back through some of the numbers in recent years. In 2021, Georgia won 11 games by 20 points or more. And 20 points is sort of the number I look for to really determine a blowout. And in 2021, they won 11 games by that margin. In 2022, they won 10 games by 20 points or more. Last year, 8 games were won by 20 points or more. To this point in the season, that's only happened twice, and that last 20-point win came all the way back in week 2 against Tennessee Tech. And Kirby Smart made the point this week of saying, that's probably roughly about 100-plus snaps lost for backups over the course of the season. So I think that's a big reason why we've seen fewer contributions from freshmen this year, just because they haven't necessarily gotten the opportunities that they have in the past in some of those blowout games. So this game against UMass for guys, not just like Chris Cole and Nitro Tuggle, but say a Justin Williams, a Quintavious Johnson, those types of guys that can make that next step, go out there, Ellis Robinson potentially, and show that they can contribute and play winning football.
Well, let's not make any mistake about it. There has been one freshman. We'll kind of put KJ Bolden to the side because he's been there from day one, but some of those guys who have really made contributions, I mean, the obvious one for me is Nate Frazier, who last Saturday, 19 carries for 68 yards and a touchdown. He's had a touchdown in each of his last 3 games. What's crazy is without the Rod Robinson injury, the Branson Robin injury, sorry, it's weird to think that his role on this team could be so different if it weren't for all these things that had to happen for him to be in the place that he is.
Yeah, and Nate Frazier's production over the course of the season has fluctuated. He did not play in the loss against Alabama, only had, I think, 4 carries in the game against Texas. But then Trevor Etienne suffers a rib injury. I don't expect him to play for the rest of this regular season. And Frazier now has to become the lead running back. Even last week, Cash Jones was on the injury report. He had a boot on for much of the week. And while he was able to play, Nate Frazier finished that game with 19 carries. And, again, he's not the explosive back that people expect him to be based on his athleticism and shiftiness. They have not yet had a 100-yard rusher this season for Georgia. But Frazier has shown that he can earn those tough yards. He's gotten some goal line carries and has been able to score in those situations. You think Florida, Ole Miss, and then last week against Tennessee to salt the game away there. So Frazier is at least making the most of his opportunity. And while there's maybe some difference in terms of how some people view Nate Frazier versus what he's actually contributing to this team, he's been asked and thrust into a bigger role, and he's delivered so far for Georgia. And as the games and stakes get bigger, I think that's going to help him in a long-term development with his game.
And there's another freshman running back that I expect over the next 2 weeks is going to have to play a bigger role, and that's Chauncey Bowens. He only had 5 carries last week, which was a career high for him. But if what Connor says goes, Etienne's not going to play the next 2 weeks. Cash Jones still may be just a tad bit hurt. And then they tried to throw Dylan Bell in there last week, and that's how he got hurt. I think that Chauncey's role over the next 2 weeks is going to have to significantly increase. And I'm curious to see what he does in this position, Connor.
I would caution against expecting a ton from Chauncey Bowens, if only because I think Georgia is expected to get Branson Robinson back, if not this week against UMass, then next week against Georgia Tech. He's been out since the Mississippi State game when he picked up an MCL injury, but it speaks to where Georgia is in the running back room because of all these injuries right now, where Bowens, who effectively hadn't played since the Tennessee Tech game, is out there being asked to pick up key first downs late in that game. It's encouraging that Georgia at least trusts him enough to put him in that situation, but I don't know how much of that is Bowens going out there and actually earning it versus how much of that is a byproduct of the injury system that Georgia has at running back right now.
One freshman that I think is kind of like slid under the radar this season and has been sneaky good for the Dawgs has been Chris Cole, who whenever they went through the 2024 recruiting cycle, you mentioned Justin Williams. He was the highest ranked linebacker coming out of that class, but it's been Chris Cole that's really emerged for the Dawgs this season. I think maybe he's just gone a little bit underrated because of the star-studded room that he's in, but he's contributing every game, especially on third down, and I don't expect that to stop. Even with Smile Monday coming back, we still saw him get reps in the game at Tennessee, which just goes to show how the coaching staff and the players around him have been impressed by his performances, especially being someone that young in that position where there is so much experience already.
Yeah, I think with Chris Cole, he's carved out a role in that third down defense. And I think part of the reason that even though Small Munden led the Georgia linebackers in snaps a week ago was Cole has shown that he's earned the trust of this coaching staff. And while some of that might be schematic against Tennessee, where they do try and spread you out, and so it helps you have an athletic freak like Cole back there at linebacker, it's encouraging for his long-term development. And I find it interesting when Kirby Smart has talked about Chris Cole and Justin Williams, he's usually done so in tandem. And so while Chris Cole is the one getting the playing time right now, I have the feeling that Justin Williams isn't too far behind. We know that because of how much he contributes on special teams. And I actually think this weekend against UMass is a big time to watch Williams. He had a nice tackle for loss in the season opener against Clemson, and I'm interested in seeing how Justin Williams continues to build and develop, in addition to a guy like Chris Cole, who has pretty clearly carved out a role for himself, even with Small Munden returning to the lineup.
So in just a minute, I do want to do like a rapid fire of your freshman awards for this season, since we are talking about the newcomers, but I also don't want to just skip over some of the transfers that have made an impact too, especially in the game against Tennessee, the two that stood out to me. And coincidentally are still two of the ones that are left, are London Humphreys and Benjamin Urosic. I feel like Benjamin Urosic has taken a lot of heat from DawgNation this entire season, but in my opinion, he looked like an NFL-type tight end. Now, Georgia did make more use of their tight ends in the game against Tennessee, but he was really one of those guys that stepped up for me.
Yeah, Urosic's coming off his best game as a Bulldog. 5 catches, 51 yards. Probably could have even been a little bit better, but one of his receptions was negated due to a loss and lucky holding penalty. And while, yes, we're talking about what he does as a pass catcher, the biggest area where he's improved from the beginning of the year to now is how physical of a blocker he has become. You've seen him improve in that area, and that's a big reason why you're seeing him go out there and play more. You know, it's old and it's cliche and people may not love it, but to get the rock, you got to block. And Urosic has done that so far this season for Georgia. You know, slow start obviously has understandably taken a lot of criticism. He's admitted that, you know, the speed of Georgia here and the physicality with which they played with was an adjustment for him. But you've seen the value in having a veteran. This is a guy who's in his 5th year in college, has been able to make those adjustments and has the mental toughness to handle some of the criticism that has come his way. And if Georgia's able to use him like they were on Saturday, where you have guys like Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky stretching the field vertically, that opens things up underneath for Urosic, which Carson Beck was able to find him for a key first down late in that game. And so I think you have to love with what you have seen out of Urosic, not just in the pass catching game, obviously, this past week, but how he has developed and improved steadily over the course of the season.
All right, let's do some rapid fire freshman awards really quick while we're just on the subject of talking about them. Not our DawgNation Oscars. Don't let it fool you. We're going to go full out when the time comes, but we'll just do some freshman awards. Who's been your freshman MVP this season?
Got to go KJ Bolden. I think that, you know, yes, he is not, you know, as productive as Dan Jackson or is not the star that Malachi Starks is, but this is a guy who's played meaningful minutes in every game. His playing time has not really fluctuated, and this is a guy who's come in and filled a very important role for Georgia. And with Janelle Aguero dealing with a little bit of a hand injury right now, I think it's more important than ever that you continue to get solid contributions out of Bolden. So while there are flashier names on offense to go with, KJ Bolden has been rock solid steady for much of the season, and for that, he is our MVP.
Yeah, I definitely feel like he's at least been the most consistent out of everyone, and not just playing time, but physicality across the board. Who's been your most improved freshman?
Doing this off the top of my head, I'm going to say over the course of the season, the most improved freshman is probably Chris Cole. From where we thought he might be at the beginning of the season to what he is doing for Georgia right now on a consistent basis, playing in that third down role. He had the big pass breakup against Texas there earlier this year. From what was expected of him to what he is actually doing, I would say the improvement that Chris Cole has made to be in that sort of position has been the biggest jump of a freshman so far.
Yeah, I definitely think I am in agreement with you on this one. What's been your favorite play by a freshman so far? There's a lot to choose from in this.
I'm going to go with the KJ Bolden hit in the game against Texas. It was a huge play at the time because, again, you know, Dan Jackson had just been ejected, so KJ Bolden is thrust in there. Makes a huge hit to stop Texas from converting a third down. Brings up a 4th and 1. Texas false starts. They end up turning the ball over on downs following that play. Came at a huge point in that game, and so I think that hit made by KJ Bolden in that game really helped swing the game and showed that KJ was more than willing to step up in a moment in which he was called upon.
All right, last thing, we've even talked about some different options on the show, so you can just reiterate yourself or you can go with a new one. Who's your freshman that still has time to break out?
Breakout, you know what? I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to say Nitro Tuggle here. He had a breakthrough moment for Georgia in the win over Tennessee, but in terms of truly breakout, look, they don't have Colby Young. I don't know when we're going to get him back. You look at Dylan Bell as well with his injury situation right now. They just need someone who can be a physical presence on the outside. I don't think that's exactly Arian Smith, and Dominic Lovett is much more of a slot wide receiver. So I think Nitro Tuggle in these coming weeks is someone who I'm very interested in seeing how Georgia further integrates him into the offense.
All right, so in just a minute, we're going to do our Dog Bite segment. We'll do more updates on the running back room, as well as talk about everyone's reaction to the penalties that happened in the Georgia-Tennessee game because, well, everybody had something to say about it. But we want to remind you that here on DawgNation at Large, we are so excited to partner with Zagoria Law Firm. They are the only law firm in the state that represents people who have been bitten by dogs and as well as those who have been knocked down by dogs. That's right, dog fans. They are the official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. They literally wrote the book on how to win these cases. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, give them a call at 833-GA-DOG-BITE. That's DOGBITE, or visit ZagoriaLaw.com. So let's take a deeper dive into the running back room. No ETN. Branson, is he back like 100% for sure, or is that going to be more of a game time decision?
I think it's going to be a game time decision. It's important to note with Georgia having played all of its SEC games, we're not going to know the status of these guys until we see them on game day there. So Branson Robinson been dealing with an MCL injury. Obviously, Trevor Etienne, there was a report from ESPN's Holly Rowe. He's dealing with fractured ribs, and that lines up with what I have heard on the situation there as well. Kirby Smart has not necessarily confirmed that Etienne has a fractured rib, but I think that this is something that is now a long-term injury. Did not play against Tennessee, left the game against Ole Miss. And so with Branson potentially coming back, maybe this week against UMass, I would say maybe far more likely against Georgia Tech after Thanksgiving. That's going to provide Georgia with some much-needed depth at the running back room, because you even saw on Saturday they try to put Dylan Bell in there and get some extra short yardage area reps, and he ends up getting hurt as well. So this is a team that is very banged up at running back. You can't afford any more injuries at this position, and there's a big reason why they're relying on freshmen. They're relying on Cass Jones to gut it out as he deals with an injury as well. So I think they could benefit from getting a guy like Branson Robinson back.
I'm so excited that we get the chance to talk about this. The Brett Thorson video, if you haven't watched it, it's all over Georgia social channels. They brought Brett Thorson in and did like a little tackling session. Here he comes. Like, you can just tell that the team is so excited. I love that UGA still has jokes. I actually really enjoy seeing them have a good time. It feels like that team chemistry is back up, and there was the line he said about a certain 5'2" coach who wears a visor. I mean, the whole video was perfect, and even if you're not a Georgia fan, I think that this is still the kind of video that you can watch and find some enjoyment from. Don't know why he went barefoot. I didn't notice that until I watched it the second time around, but just all around a feel-good video coming at a feel-good time. And I mean, Brett Thorson's tackle was beautiful.
It not only was it beautiful, it came at a huge moment where if he doesn't make that play, Tennessee probably returns a punt for a touchdown, and it's 14-0 at that point in the game. And Brett Thorson, great guy, semifinalist, I think one of the best punters in the country. This is a guy who effectively hadn't had a punt returned on him since the Mississippi State game in 2022. So in over 2+ years, they've done a phenomenal job on that Georgia punt team. Tennessee, to its credit, is able to make a big return in that game, and Brett Thorson was willing to meet the moment, made a huge tackle there, and you see having a great time, having a lot of fun in front of his teammates. Tackling has been somewhat of an issue for this team this year, so I'm glad they were at least able to lean into the joke a little bit and have some fun with it and bring some lightheartedness for a team that I think has been under a lot of scrutiny and has faced a lot of criticism.
Yeah, I will say him making that tackle, there was a certain sense of poetic justice in that I think that everyone can root for. We'll go ahead and move on to the next thing. So the penalties. I believe there were wrong penalties on both sides, but it was one of those things that, like, as soon as you got on social media after the game, I mean, everybody's talking about it. Georgia fans, Tennessee fans, people who were outside of it. I don't think that Josh Heupel helped with the conversation at all, considering the way he went about discussing the penalties. I just think it's one of those things that even if the right calls were made or the calls that people wanted were made, I still don't know if it entirely changes the outcome of the game. And it almost sounded like certain fans of Tennessee were saying that this is the only way that Georgia wins this game is with the penalty calls that benefited them.
This is loser talk. And Kaylee, I know you've got North Georgia ties. You probably see a lot more Tennessee fans. You hang out with more Tennessee fans. There's something in the water in there in North Georgia. Talking about officiating after a game in a situation like this, debating calls back and forth, loser talk. This is not, in my opinion, like the Texas situation where they so clearly change the outcome and the way things are done in the sport moving forward, which we have seen as multiple fan bases have now flung trash onto the field. But debating a face mask penalty where his helmet popped off, debating whether Carson Beck false started on a key third down where he clearly did not, because you are allowed to have one player moving backwards. The 12-man thing, look, that's a judgment call that happens all the time. And look, the reality is, Josh Heupel, you can complain about penalties and the way that game was called all you want. You also scored 0 points in the second half of this game, and you can complain about penalties and say this, that, and the third there. But your offense, which you are known for, and you have a priority 5-star quarterback in Nico, going out there and scoring 0 points in the second half that game is why you lost. Not because of the officiating, not because of anything that Georgia did.
And see how no Georgia fans threw water bottles or nobody stormed the field? Very demure, very mindful of all of Sanford Stadium, because there's just a different standard at Georgia when it comes to those things. So this is
I think the hedges also somewhat prevent people from getting
it's okay. We're giving credit to everyone. Okay, hedges, we'll give you some credit as well, but mostly the fans. So this is something that you're gonna have to explain to me like I'm 5, because I've read through the rules and I'm still not exactly sure how this happens. And I know that certain things will play itself out over the next 2 weeks, but there's still a route for Georgia to make it to the SEC championship. But I think utter chaos has to ensue. How exactly does Georgia still make it to Atlanta, Connor?
The simplest path for Georgia to get back to Atlanta would be Alabama to lose one of its final 2 games at Oklahoma or home against Auburn, because the way that the strength of schedule tiebreaker would work out, combined conference opponent record of the teams that you played on your SEC slate. Now I can already feel your eyes glazing over as I say this. Alabama would win that. So if there's a tie amongst 2 lost teams, Alabama would win that. And that would keep Georgia from going. And in all likelihood, the winner of Texas A&M, Texas would play Alabama if chalk holds these last 2 weeks and the favorites went out. But this is college football where favorites don't always win out. And there is another scenario that doesn't involve Alabama losing that gets Georgia into the SEC championship game. Let's say Auburn, only a 2.5-point home favorite or home underdog this week, beats Texas A&M. And then Texas A&M turns around next week and beats Texas. That would leave you with 6 2-loss SEC teams. The 2 teams that would go and play in the SEC championship in that scenario where there is a 6-way tie for first place would be Alabama and would be Georgia. There are a bunch of other chaos scenarios out there as well, but the simplest path is either Alabama losing one of those 2 games or there being 6 2-loss SEC teams, in which case Georgia and Alabama would play for the SEC championship.
So in your opinion, because clearly you've done the research on this, which of these 2 scenarios would be more likely to happen in your mind?
I think right now, if I had to, say one, I think that A&M loses to Auburn this week on the road and then finds a way to win next week at home against Texas would be far more likely. As we'll show on Go With The Flow on Friday, there's not exactly a lot of confidence that Oklahoma is going to be able to keep it close against Alabama, much less beat Alabama. So I think that, Georgia fans, whether you want this or not, if Georgia's going to play in the SEC championship game, I think the most likely opponent at this point would be Alabama.
I just think it would be absolutely so crazy if in this new era of college football and the SEC with no divisions and with everything that's gone this season, if it somehow ends up being an Alabama-Georgia SEC championship and just like a repeat of history. I mean, that would be the most anticlimactic SEC championship to like what's been a crazy SEC season. Anyway, go ahead.
No,
I want you to. I want you to. Please, go.
I would say if that's the SEC championship we get, Georgia against Alabama, I don't think either one of those teams is going to want to play in that game. And I think that makes the stakes all the higher because if there's a third loss there in that SEC championship game, we have no idea how the committee is going to handle that and react to that. And you put yourself in a very vulnerable situation in the event that you do have a third loss coming out of the SEC championship game.
Well, we'll clock that tea when it starts brewing. Last thing on here, and we're going to bring in Cody Chaffins for this because I would like to get his opinion as well. Playoff rankings released on Tuesday. The way it looks now, Georgia would go to Penn State to potentially face Miami, or they would face Miami in the quarters. So in looking at this and putting the ranking that they're in aside now, what would be our dream playoff scenario? And we're going to bring in Cody, but I'll actually start because I do believe that the way, the position that they're in now, I would favor that to go to Penn State on the road. Because I just think Penn State is pretty fraudulent across the board. I don't think that they win in big games. I don't think that weather would be a factor like everyone's saying it was. I will gladly see Georgia play Miami in the quarterfinals because again, I still think Miami is fraudulent. I'm not that high on Cam Ward. And then a Georgia-Texas rematch for the Final Four, I'll take those odds. So the way they have it set up now, that would be my dream scenario if Georgia's got to play on the road. I'm sure somebody's got a differing opinion. Let's go to Cody and then we'll go to Connor.
All right, so for me, and again, with all the numbers like the SEC championship stuff, I can't figure that out. So how this happens, I don't know. I don't know if it's possible. I would say if Georgia had to go on the road to start, go to Indiana. Let's go beat up on them. Then you gotta get that Midwest feel. It's probably easier than going to Penn State, let's say for sure. So you go to Indiana. Then you face Colorado in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. So you come back home, get to play a home game, get to play prime. Travis Hunter coming back to Atlanta for his final game. So that would be fun. And then you got to go Cotton Bowl. And maybe you play Oregon there for the Dan Lanning, all those vibes and the talk there. So somehow you play Oregon in the Cotton Bowl, come back, play the national championship game in Atlanta against Alabama. I do think you just kind of don't want to be a national champion with having that Alabama hanging in your craw. So if you get a chance to play, Dog fans I don't think really want to play them again, but to me that would be kind of fun.
I have a question.
All right.
Somebody might have to fact check me on this. I thought it was the ACC champion plays in the Peach Bowl, so I thought that the quarterfinals would be, if Georgia takes that route, it'd be Georgia and Miami in the Peach Bowl, right?
Is that right? Is the Peach tied to it?
Peach is tied to the ACC, and Colorado / the Big 12 champion will go play in the Fiesta Bowl.
That's so much more fun.
And the winner of the SEC goes to the Sugar Bowl regardless. So even though Georgia might want to play in the Peach Bowl, the winner of the SEC championship game will be playing in the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, I knew that tie was because that's old-timey ties, but I didn't realize that ACC has an old-timey tie with the Peach Bowl. Interesting. Yep. Okay, so maybe it can't happen. I've never been to Fiesta. I would love to go out there, too.
Me too.
Yeah. All right, dream scenario. First of all, I don't think Kaylee fully appreciates and understands how difficult it is going to be to get to State College, Pennsylvania, 4 days before Christmas. It's 3 hours from any sort of major metropolitan airport in either direction. So I'm really not trying to do and make that trip right before Christmas there. I do think that Georgia's going to have to end up going on the road in the first game. So we're going to have some somewhat realistic scenarios in this. I'm surprised Kaylee didn't say Notre Dame, given that she hates Notre Dame.
That's why I didn't want to go there.
Would love nothing more than to see Georgia just trounce the Fighting Irish. Georgia fans have fond memories of going up to South Bend in 2017. You can fly in and out of Chicago pretty easily. It's 90 minutes from South Bend to Chicago, roughly, depending on traffic, the same length from Athens to Atlanta there. So that's your first game. And then for my dream scenario, so that would be the 8-9 game. You play number 1 seeded Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Got a chance to go back to the Rose Bowl, most beautiful venue in all of college sports. And you're going to have to beat Oregon at some point, so why not do it in that first game? Go around, turn around, beat them. Beat, whoever in that Cotton Bowl game. And then I think, as Cody said, beat Alabama in the national championship game, because that, ultimately, again, you can't let Alabama fans have that. Oh, well, we beat you in a season where you won a national championship. And I think beating Alabama for another national championship would be pretty sweet.
I love it. I got no complaints about that. I would love to go back to Rose Bowl, too. And especially since the UCLA trip got canceled, that'd be our chance.
Yep.
Okay, so in just a minute we are going to do our favorite college football memes of the week, but next week is Thanksgiving, so we're going to have some scheduling changes that I wanted to update you guys on. We're going to have a double feature on Wednesday night. No Thanksgiving show, but we are going to do DawgNation at Large. It's going to be hosted by myself and Cody Chaffins, and that's going to air Wednesday at 6, and it's immediately going to be followed by Before the Hedges with myself and Jeff Santel at 7 o'clock. So Wednesday night double feature, at Large at 6, Hedges at 7. Stay for both. Get your popcorn. Get ready. It's going to be awesome. All right. Let's go ahead and do our meme machine.
Who's that coming down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's a meme machine and Randy Black. It's a meme machine and Randy Black. No, no!
Is it possible those guys get drunker every week? Every time I listen to it. All right. Sorry, that just came to my head. Who's going first this week, Kaylee?
Cody, why don't you go first?
All right, mine is college football playoff related. I think for me, for the most part, they're all going to be. But Lane Kiffin actually retweeted this one. It's a guy, Alabama. Texas hadn't beaten a ranked team. Georgia, Bama lost to Vandy. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. And then the Big Ten says, the SEC's not that good, but no. We ain't going to let you talk about us. We can talk about each other. You will not talk about our family like that. So I think, to me, that definitely stuck out. Big Ten, you just hush. We're arguing over here. You stay over there. We're doing our thing.
That really has how this season has felt, right? Like, I mean, the SEC's all kind of sticking up for each other, which, weird to see.
It is. Not, there may be some people talking bad about each other once we get closer in, right? Like, give it a couple weeks, and then you're going to have to, like, literally, if it's Georgia versus Alabama versus Tennessee, they're all going to have arguments. There's going to be some interesting things still to come. All right, Kaylee.
Yeah, mine's also playoff related, so I'll go ahead and go. It's a little bit longer. You're going to have to stick with me through this.
A novel.
It is a novel, but...
Zoom in, I can't.
I'm sorry, I'm going to read it to you. It says the college football playoff in a nutshell. So here we go. It all starts with Northern Illinois beating Notre Dame at 16-14. And it asked, and you still ranked Notre Dame 6? And they said, yes, it doesn't count. It happened in September. And it says, but you ranked Alabama over Georgia. Yeah, they beat them in September. And Tennessee lost to Arkansas. I just broke my pen. Oh, my gosh. In September. And it's got Patrick Starr saying, I'm not understanding your point. And it's got the guy asking if Texas has any key wins. And it says, yes, Arkansas. And they said, but you just said it. It says, oh, and Vandy too. And they said, so is Arkansas a good win or a bad loss? And they say losses count more. And they say, so Ole Miss is lost to Kentucky. And said, yep, it doesn't count. It happened in September. And I know what you're sitting here thinking. You're like, this is so confusing. Well, this is an exact replica of what has been going on with the college football playoff rankings. It's just flat out confusing, and I think that captures the essence of how chaotic it's been, and it just still feels like we're not getting any closer to knowing kind of what to expect each week. So
just when we thought Connor's explanation of the path to the SEC championship was the thing, that is the thing.
Sorry,
the longest
explanation
out there. But very good, Kaylee. We all enjoyed it. Yes. All right,
so I'm going to close things out. I'm going to keep it short and sweet here. I love
you got a long one, too. You can't say
No,
anything.
I'm going to keep the explanation short. This is a Tennessee fan taking matters into his own hands. He wants to put Tennessee in the playoffs. So what does he do? He bets on all the teams ahead of Tennessee in the playoff to win. This guy's probably a gambler of some sorts, knowing that at least one of these teams is going to lose. And it's a classic win-win scenario. Either Tennessee finds a way to get into the playoff because one of these bets loses, or he wins his parlay. It's a win-win scenario, classic emotional hedge. I love this kind of thing. And I think if you're a Georgia fan that doesn't want to play in the SEC championship game, why not sprinkle a little money on Oklahoma and Auburn to win outright, 10 to win 101, just throwing it out there.
A 6-leg parlay to win $88? Yeah, that tells you that's all the favorites. I guess everybody loves the classic win-win. Kaylee, what'd you think?
I don't know. I don't bet. The closest thing I do to bet is go with the flow every week because I know the second I put down some money, it's just never going to end. So I don't really understand, but I see the vision, I guess.
I now know by watching Go With The Flow every week who I would follow on betting advice and who I wouldn't. By the way, tune in tomorrow at noon. It gets a little spicy on Go With The Flow this week. Anyway, all right, what's next?
Why don't we do an accountability check? But it's not for us so much as it is the stadium operation. So let's run it.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
I miss that staging so much. That's one of my favorite ones. I wasn't even sure if we were still going to have it. I didn't know if there was going to be like an awkward pause and we were just going to do like a weird transition. So good to have that one back. So this accountability check is more so around a month and a half ago, right after Georgia played Mississippi State, I believe. And
it was the Auburn game.
The Auburn game.
Yeah,
okay, so right before Mississippi State, when Kirby Smart called out fan atmosphere and said that things needed to get better, and I think we all kind of knew that the fans were going to bring it, but I do feel like the people who are in charge of fan atmosphere also really stepped it up. So we're going to reference some of the things that we talked about or got close with what actually happened and how it impacted things. So just more of like a group discussion about how awesome it was. And one of the things that Connor had mentioned, not specifically was done, but kind of in the same category. Connor mentioned the black jerseys. And there weren't black jerseys, but I did love the blackout, like seeing all the fans in their black and like when they did the wide shot of it on ESPN, seeing everyone, like that was so cool. And I do feel like a theme gave the atmosphere a greater sense of purpose. So even though it wasn't black jerseys, I still loved the blackout. And at nighttime, that was awesome.
For every night game moving forward, Georgia fans should just agree, let's all wear black. I think it looks incredible in the stadium. It pairs incredibly well with the red jerseys on the field. I think that moving forward, we shouldn't do like blackout as a one-time thing. It should be an every night game thing for the fans.
It's going to be a lot of night games next year. Looking at that schedule, there's going to be a lot of 7:30 starts. But, yeah, I thought that was great. Though, you know, we did the whole segment on all the things we thought would make it a better atmosphere. And none of us said fireworks back then.
Yes.
But, man, the fireworks were cool. I was really impressed with that. I saw before the game, there was like a fire extinguisher on the roof of Tate. So I'm like, they're definitely doing fireworks. And then when they started, the Rockets' red glare was the first time we saw it. I thought that was so cool in the national anthem. And then they just kept going on from there. So I really enjoyed the fireworks. I know that ain't cheap. So shout out to those folks for spending a little money on that.
Yeah, I do feel like that was one of the absolute game changers. I can't believe none of us said it because I do feel like the games that we've gone to that have been away, the fireworks keep coming up. But if I'm a player, like I want to make those fireworks go off. I'm fighting a little bit harder to get into the end zone.
And one thing I'll note, like it has happened in the Ole Miss game where there was sort of like some smoke after they set off fireworks going into the fourth quarter and it created a fog on the field. Kind of happened again here with Georgia and Tennessee in the fourth quarter of this game. And so, you know, there might be a little bit of an advantage in having to make your opponent play through some fog there in the middle of the game due to some fireworks there. So kudos to Josh Brooks and all those involved for making the fireworks happen. I don't know if this is going to be an every game thing because, as Cody said, it can be kind of expensive. But for night games, again, certainly I think that this is something that they should continuously incorporate.
Cody, one of the things that you mentioned when we did this segment a while ago was the concept of like an in-stadium host or an MC. And they kind of had someone that was like leading chants this time around, and I thought it sounded a lot better.
Yeah, they definitely did the Georgia Bulldogs a lot more than they did. And in the fourth quarter, they brought the cheerleader out. There you see him. He came out to kind of lead it. Yeah, the players do it off the top, the former players, which is always cool. But late in the game, they just need a little reminder and somebody to get it going. Because it's hard to get it for the fans to get that going by themselves. So when he was out there doing it, I thought that was a great moment. It is something we saw like at Alabama, and I thought really helped with them. So kudos to them. I'm going to say that, you know, all those folks were watching DawgNation at large and taking notes. And, you know, I thought that was great. Congratulations.
All right, last thing that we'll do, this was something that Connor had brought up, and it was the idea of like a fourth quarter incentive. And one thing I thought was really fascinating was whenever they did the fourth quarter lights, they gave all the students the red lights to use. And I don't know if that's technically an incentive for them to stay, but it was definitely something that was worth the wait, like having to sit in your spot until the fourth. That way you could use that red light. It was such a cool surprise.
Yeah, they were able to do it throughout the game, but I think every student that went there, you know, has the intention of staying to the fourth quarter to light up Sanford. And in that situation, it worked out perfectly, looked incredible. I think, it's, as you point out, Kaylee, incentivizes fans not just to stay for the game, but come early as well to get in that section and have the opportunity to be a part of that.
And we were out there for the dog walk. That student section was full by the end of the dog walk. As soon as they opened the gates, those folks were sprinting down the stands, and they filled it up. And more than one player mentioned thankful that they could go out in warm-ups and have that kind of electric atmosphere already.
All right, guys. Let's do some touchdown picks this week. Oh, yeah.
I am not good at this.
I will do a score update in case you are lost. Connor and I are tied at the top with 4. Not a big deal at all. And then Cody, 2.
2 and really barely 2 because the one week I missed, I got the Cash Jones. So, yeah, I'm kind of the kiss of death. So good luck, whoever I pick.
Well, with this week being UMass, we're going to do things a little bit differently. So we're going to pick 2 players. We're going to still do an offensive touchdown, but it has to be a player who has not been selected throughout the course of this entire season. So I believe it was no ETN, no Nate Frazier, no Cash Jones, no Arian, no Dom Lovett, no Dylan Bell, he's not going to play, so it doesn't matter anyway. And I think there's maybe, no Lawson Lucky, no Oscar Delp.
Whew, okay.
So.
Who goes first?
I don't remember who went first. I never remember who goes first anymore. Why don't we just let you pick out of the goodness of your heart?
Oh, because who's not going to get a touchdown this week. All right. So that leaves us. You guys talked about him earlier in the show. I go Ben Urosic, the other tight end. Maybe he'll get a touchdown this week. He's playing a little bit better. I think Kirby wants to reward that. Tight ends are definitely going to be a part of the game plan without enough wide receivers out there. So we'll go Ben Urosic.
I will go next. I will take Chauncey Bowens. I think he's going to get some carries late in this game as well. I'm going to bank on that. Maybe he gets some goal line carries early in the game as well. To take Chauncey Bowens to get in the end zone.
And I'm going to take Nitro Tuggle because you mentioned Cody. I do feel like players get rewarded, and I feel like Nitro Tuggle did such a good job in the game against Tennessee. They're going to want to reward him for that by getting him his first touchdown as a dog. So I'm going to take Nitro. And then we're also going to do a player that's going to have a sack this week. So I guess we'll go backwards. I'm actually going to take Chaz Chambliss.
I think he could get a touchdown. We had him as a lead blocker last week, right?
Yeah. And they are treating Saturday as senior day as well. Important to note that they're going to honor players like Chaz, who has the chance to go his entire UGA career without losing a game at home.
That's pretty cool.
So I believe I would go next. Jalen Walker usually doesn't have sacks in these types of games. He tends to only save them for big games. I'm going to go with Damon Wilson because I think he might get some reps later on in the game as well there. And I don't think this is a game where Georgia blitzes a ton, so that might remove some of the linebackers from consideration. So I'm going to go Damon Wilson.
I'll go Christian Miller. Christian Miller. I would say somebody up the gut, pushing those guys around a little bit. Shortest distance to the quarterback is a straight line, and we'll see if one of those D tackles, but I'll go Miller this week.
Sorry, let me write these down. Cody just took Christian Miller. Sorry, I threw my pen across the room, and now I'm having to use...
broke it. It's been a rough day on your pen.
This is... Look, no pen is safe from me. Either I'm going to lose it, I'm going to break it, or I'm going to chew on it. If you want to be nice and get me a Christmas present, just get me like 100 pack of pens because I go through it pretty quick.
All right.
With that, we'll say thank you to Cody. Cody's going to host with me next week. Connor, what did you learn on today's show?
Kaylee chews on her pens.
Yeah. I mean, listen, pens,
that's an ick.
Fingernails.
That's an ick.
Doesn't matter. I'm not trying to impress you. Water bottles, specifically like the little things like around it, like I'll take those off. I just have a nervous tick, and so it's like a stress reliever of sorts.
Nervous ick.
I walked right into that one, didn't I? Yeah. Okay. Well, I can't help it. So it is what it is. All right. So don't forget, double feature next week at Large Wednesday at 6, Hedges Wednesday at 7. And we're going to get ready for UMass. We're going to get ready for Georgia Tech. DawgNation, thank you for joining us here tonight on DawgNation at Large. See you right back here next Wednesday, 6 o'clock.